this reason, crews patrolling the river ate and slept on deck and tried never to go below for more than a few moments. Then there was the noise. The Swift's twin 12V71 turbocharged General Motors Detroit Marine diesels made it impossible to sneak up on anything. And even at idle speed, a row of hinged metal exhaust pipe covers rattled like castanets. Swift boat folklore held that although the engines were loud, the jungle smothered the Doppler effect. The bad guys could hear a boat coming, but could not tell whether it was 2 miles away or just around the river bend. This thesis was never proven, but it provided some comfort, like crossing your fingers. In all, the Navy sent 116 Swift boats to fight in Vietnam between 1965 and 1970. About 600 U.S. Navy officers, mostly lieutenants junior grade, but also a few lieutenants and ensigns, served aboard the boats. The enlisted, about 3,000, were mostly second-class and third-class petty officers, along with significant numbers of first-class petty officers and seaman strikers. 50 Swift boat sailors died in Vietnam, all but a handful in firefights, and about 400 others were wounded. After the Navy turned over the last 14 in-country U.S. Swift boats to the South Vietnamese on December 1, 1970, the few remaining stateside boats survived as trainers and later as museum pieces, all but disappearing from the American consciousness for decades. But in 2004, Swift boats surfaced briefly and notoriously when pro-Republican Swift boat veterans upended the presidential campaign, denouncing the candidacy of Democratic Senator John Kerry, a former boat skipper, who in the 1970s had played a prominent role in the anti-war organization Vietnam Veterans Against the War. That election added the newly minted verb "to swift boat" to the U.S. campaign lexicon, used to describe almost any particularly virulent form of political smear. The story of Swift boats is much more than this. For those who served aboard them, the boats offered unmatched lessons in heroism, teamwork, camaraderie, and the ability to function under life-or-death pressure. Some young men grew up on Swift boats. Others grew old before their time. Some saw things that amazed and awed them. Others saw things they wished they had never seen. All saw things they never forgot. Swift boats showed the Navy at its best, giving kids barely out of high school or college opportunities for leadership and initiative they could never have found elsewhere. Swift boats also showed the Navy at its worst. They were a flawed solution to a festering crisis, evidence that the Navy, which had been worrying for years about Vietnam, had done nothing to prepare for it. The stories in these pages offer a lesson in how the United States makes war and what war does to the people who fight it. The lesson comes from an earlier time, from a war that Americans long tried to forget and that far too many have long forgotten. While the first American ground troops, 3,500 combat Marines, arrived in Vietnam in 1965, the Vietnam War per se had begun 2 decades earlier, at the end of World War II, when Ho Chi Minh's Viet Minh insurgents seized Hanoi from the Japanese, proclaimed independence from France, and within months embarked on a war of liberation against their colonial masters, ultimately defeating them in the decisive Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954. The Geneva Accords, negotiated even as the French surrendered at Dien Bien Phu, ended what the victors described as the French War. The accords divided the country in 2 at the 17th parallel, with elections to come in 1956 to choose a permanent government for a united Vietnam. Ho's Viet Minh Communists, supplied principally by China and allied with the